What's up, everybody? My name is Jonathan Solomon. I'm a part of the team that is putting on the Transcend Conference, a celebration of culture, Christ in culture, more particularly a celebration of Christ in Black culture on September the 17th and the 18th here in Greensboro, North Carolina. Listen, today we're just here with our speakers, all of them except for Dr. Robert Smith Jr., who unfortunately couldn't join us, but he will be with us at the conference. We're here to just hear their hearts, to hear them talk about why they are so on fire for something like this to happen. So y'all stay tuned and let's look at all of this and let's hear from everybody.
It is what it is. Life, our God's in the building at night. On deck, then light with splendor and might. Hands in the air if you're feeling it. I know the feeling. The feeling is life. It's the feeling of life for real. Life for real. There's life in Christ, and this life is real. Now, hands in the air if you're feeling them. I know the feeling. The feeling is life. It's the feeling of life. Ladies and gents, lend me your ear. There was a life, and I'm living it, yeah. I was living in darkness, I was living in fear. But then there was a spark, and a light would appear. Like Genesis 1, it was
What's good, everybody? My name is Jonathan Solomon. As always, I'm a part of the team that's putting on the Transcend Conference, a celebration of Christ and culture, more particularly in Black culture. We're just existing because we want to see the Revelation 7 vision exist, and we think that this is a good way to do it, to encourage, to celebrate, and to lift up. So today I have with me, they'll introduce themselves, I'm sure, as they speak, but firstly, Pastor Clint Darst of King's Cross Church. I almost forgot the name of my own church. William, the Ambassador Branch, otherwise known as Duce to people who are near him. If you're not near him, then you can call him the professor. Professor at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Pastor Hez Cunningham-Bey, pastor at King's Cross Church as well. And we have with us via Zoom, Pastor John Onwuchekwa, pastor at Cornerstone Church, co-founder of Coffee. Why did I forget the name? Right, Portrait Coffee. I'm tripping. I always know. I always talk about it. No, look. Okay, look. We gonna leave this part in because I want y'all to see how human. No, look.
He doesn't drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee. I don't drink coffee. This no. Portrait Coffee. Entrepreneur, businessman, pastor. All of the stuff. Okay, we might cut a little bit of that. I'm not sure. We'll see. But we're happy to have all of them here. So if you've been kind of following us on social media and on YouTube, you know that I have individually interviewed every single person who will be preaching at this conference. Not with us today is Dr. Robert Smith Jr. He sends his love. He regretted not being able to come. But also not with us are our worship leaders. So I will be one of them, but also we will have TK Morrison of Vertical Church in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and Pastor KJ Scriven of Transformation Church in South Carolina. It's Charlotte, but like the South Carolina side.
Nah, you can't say it's Charlotte, but
But
it's
it's
South
like-
Carolina. It's
so-
South Carolina.
Everyone, just for clarity, Transformation in South Carolina. But for clarity, everybody, Indian Land, South Carolina. For clarity, I know most of them well. I know John a little bit, but I know these people well. So if they make a joke on me, they're lying. And we're here to talk about God. So please do ignore most of what they say. But we're here just because we want to talk, y'all. Like we want to chop about the conference. I'm sure that there are plenty of people who've been following it and they're like, I don't want to get a ticket yet because I'm either confused on what it's about or I'm not really sure that it's worth the bang for my buck. This video hopefully will be enough for you to make the decision either way. Now, if you want to come, then of course we will celebrate you. If you don't, we're going to talk about your mama. No, I'm just playing. We're not going to do that. But I'm comfortable right now, y'all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just propose some questions to them, and then I'm just going to kind of let everybody fire off. There's no formal kind of order to this. We're just going to chop. So knowing that Transcend is about our great salvation, and we're just going to walk through just kind of different facets of that. Why talk about that? our great salvation. It seems very basic. I'm sure it seems very elementary to a lot of people. But what about our great salvation should be something that cultivates the heart that is looking at this like, yo, I wanna be at something like this. Y'all chop about it. Let me ask you first, Pastor Hez. Like, you could get us started, and then we'll get into it.
Why dag he picked me out to be first? So I think one reason why is because in this cultural moment, with everything that social media is, I think we have the temptation to look to social media to be the head of the church, right? So we look to certain voices, we look to certain people, we look to certain identities, we look to things that we agree with, disagree with. And in many ways, if we're not careful, we could fall into the temptation of making our social media following our leading and guiding voice. Where when I look in the scriptures, God talks about the church as the body and himself as the head. And I just think beholding Jesus and lifting him up highly can be a starting place of recentering, regathering our focus, to just be reminded that he is the head, we're the body, therefore we're all followers of the head, Jesus Christ, and we need to kind of make sure that we are walking in the humility that it takes to not lose sight of Jesus Christ being the head of the body. And so to me, it's like, no, I think in this cultural moment, we want to behold him and lift him up so the world can see him, that we might take the background seat to him in his great glory. And so.
Yeah, one of the things that you said at the beginning that really just kind of caught my ear was you talked through, why should we spend time on this? It seems kind of elementary. And one of the things I think that I've really been gripped by is something being elementary isn't really an indicator of its relevance, right? Like I think we tend to think of like elementary school and to ask somebody if they should go back, right? We think, no, that's wholly irrelevant. I already know how to add, as if the purpose of that instruction was just to teach you a skill, but it's not that, right? Like we all went there so that we could use all of that stuff daily, right? And I think it's the elementary stuff that's the most relevant to all the stuff that we do day in and day out. And like Pastor Hez said, man, I just think in the climate that we're in right now, there's so many people that are talking past one another, and there's so many trails that we're led off into that sometimes it's good for us to just step back and to be reminded of, all right, what are the elementary things that are the most important for us. So as we're trying to find answers to all of these questions, this is helpful for us to be reminded that, oh no, that a lot of those answers are found on the building blocks of certain things that we kind of leave behind. So I'm excited just to be able to get a bunch of people in the room and to spend time reflecting on those things that are the building blocks that give us the stability, the security that I think everybody's trying to find, but few people are really finding success in really gaining that peace that they think all these answers are going to give them. So
no, I agree. There's like been this running kind of like meme thing that I've seen on social media where people are talking about they're like, I have yet to use the y equals mx plus b equation in my daily life, but I do have to balance a checkbook. Why didn't I learn that when I was in elementary school? So yeah, to the elementary, like something that that we ought to be using daily, and even seeing the flip side of that where people are like, no, I hunger for the thing that I need now, having been taught to me as an elementary thing. So yeah. Now, any thoughts, Pastor Clint or Professor Branch?
I think for me, I'm reading in Acts this morning, famous passage, kind of randomly landed there. And Acts 2:42, talking about the early church, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and prayers, and all came upon every soul. I think right now there's lots of complexity in the world. There's lots of brokenness. There's lots of pain. I don't sense there's lots of awe in the presence of God. Even in the church, I think there's lots of questions, again, yearnings for clarity, but it does seem to be like the normal temperature of Christian talk right now doesn't feel like I'm just standing in awe in the glories of who God is and what he's done through the person and work of his son. Yeah. And so just seeing that this morning, was thinking about that, like, Lord, what are the transcendent truths that lead us to stand in awe? And because if we do forget these elementary truths, if we do forget some of these things, well, then we'll be in awe of something else. And that's the essence of idolatry is I find something, that I stand in awe more than God. So I think a recalibrating of the soul. I think the church is longing for clarity in the midst of lots of complexity. And then God is worthy, and what he has done in salvation will lead us to a place of worship, and I think unity and joy in the midst of complexity and difficulty and lots of division.
And it's already been sufficiently answered, but this verticality that we're hoping to take part in celebrating and presenting, we're doing it very conscious of the fact that in this climate, often when you have such all the preachers are, with the exception of Clint, men of color, and one of the things I know about, Clint is that his life has always been lived on what he would describe as on the tracks where blacks and whites meet. So this is a group that wants to participate in turning or trying to see if the culture will give the kind of attention toward the transcendent, as right now we've been forced to think about the temporal and the horizontal. That's definitely necessary. The focus and the need to bring the divine word to bear on our temporal and our horizontal, our earthly realities continues to be a pressing need. But God always demands that he be first. Somebody say, what's the greatest commandment? And he ends up bringing in love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't ask him that. That's the second. He said the second is like it. But he started with love the Lord your God with everything that you are and everything that you have. When he gave his people the blueprint for how they were going to navigate in the land, the promised land, he gave them a law. And it starts with God focused. Don't have any other gods before me. I'm the God who redeemed you. I'm the God that you're loyal to first. I think about this, our sister Martha, who had a sister named Mary in the scriptures. Luke chapter 10 talks about one who chose to sit in awe at the feet of the Lord, Jesus, the head of the church, as you said, Hez. And the other was running around attending to the needs, the horizontal, the temporal needs of the moment. Praise God for them. But Jesus said, in this moment, you're distracted by many things. Only one is necessary, or one is primary, and that is enjoy me, focus on me, and make sure that you never detach the horizontal from the vertical. So this conference is our opportunity as people who are very sensitive to the moment to say, can we also be the ones to remind our people the vertical always precedes and out is always what the horizontal flows out of? Let's talk about that. And allow us to not always have to talk about, again, the horizontal. We want to also talk about the vertical.
Yeah. And so I had a friend who texted me last week, actually. He said he was listening to an episode of Windows and Mirrors, but I think they were in Exodus. And John, I think you guys were talking about when Moses came down from the mountain and he looked different, and everybody could see it. And the observation was, you can't be in the manifest presence of God and look the same when you come back from it. And so even thinking about like the first and foremost, like, glare at God, no, delight in him and look at him, and that will even change your heart and the outworking of how everything else happens. And so I just love that, like, from all of y'all. That was super dope. And it made me think about a way that I could shameless plug a podcast. So,
Which is a dope podcast.
Yeah, well, and I think that's probably making up for forgetting Portrait. That's what that was.
Hold on, really? All right, hold on real quick. Since it's Roast Jonathan Day, everybody, I'm looking dead at the camera right here. Windows and mirrors. There's a daily devotion that will set your heart ablaze for the Lord. Unless you're not saved yet, in which case I pray the Spirit tugs on you. And portrait. It's portrait coffee. I know it. But did anybody have any other observations? I didn't want to cut it short with some more. Excellent. I think y'all kind of answered like what makes that so needed now. So like I'll just move forward and.
I think we need to drill down on the need.
Okay, excellent.
Made it. I made it. I mean, again, I'm pricked with the reality of the need, but I think to actually address the need.
Yeah. What makes it so needed in just the world that we live in? There are so many things going on right now, and I get to see it every time I speak to like even my unsaved friends, where like there's a whole nother issue that I wasn't even aware of, and I'm like, yo, what is even that? I was locked into, like, I won't bring up specific issues, but I'm like, I've been thinking about this, and like there are just so many like streams of brokenness that we can see. Why is something like this our great salvation in this particular moment like important too?
Well, again, and I don't want to actually spend a lot of time. I mean, I want to pass the mic, but
nah, go ahead.
There is a sense in which valuing the concentration on this seems to be low. And let me just testify, I guess, from my own standpoint. I used to feel like I existed within a community of people who valued multiple things that I like. They valued the urban context in particular. They valued the historic Christian faith, sound theological, rooting and grounding. And we would love to be in the same place where all of those things were valued with a majority of the people. So we would, again, our own version of concerts or conferences, we would go. And not only are those conferences and concerts, and I think beyond, even before COVID, not only are those conferences and those concerts, they seem like they kind of waned, but desiring that to be what rallies us up. I think there are other things that can rally us up. And I just felt like we need this right now, because right now the world needs to know that even as we are aware of some of the trials and the tribulations that are pounding us, even as we're aware of the unique cultural moment that we're in right now, especially as justice is a big issue, and equality, inequality, looking at these matters and bringing the Bible rightly to bear on them, this is a time where the world needs to be exposed to the variety of people who will demonstrate that we believe that the answers to those questions begin here. Begin by looking at the God who transcends them, the God who entered them, because we're Christians. So we believe that God became flesh and dwelt for a while among us. We believe that the God that we want to present is the God that everyone doesn't take for granted, that the God that we would present is the answer to this moment. Sometimes it feels like the church doesn't believe that God himself, his person, his work, his mindset, his unique ways, his unique thoughts are the answer to this moment. But we want to testify, and we believe that people need to be exposed to people who do that. So again, I think the reason why this is needed right now is because it seems like You can be relevant without it. To go back to what Jono was saying, you can be relevant without this focus. But we believe that you can't be relevant right now without this focus. And we just want to be another. It may be happening somewhere else. Somebody may say, oh, no, we just had a conference on that. Or, no, our church was just talking about that. Or, no, we just had a retreat and that was the theme. It's out there. There's no shortage of options. We just wanted to say, since we have a fellowship among us, these are our passions, and we want to contribute to this moment, and we think that this moment recalls for it.
Yeah. So I do think one thing that I would add is I do feel like the reason why we do find ourselves in the moment right now is, so I guess to like speak back, I do feel like so for me, there was a deficit in the past on the horizontal. Right. So I do think that we kind of find ourselves like every generation, right? Like we're not pendulum swingers, but we do like find ourselves leaning too far on one side of the spectrum. And so I do feel like, this generation's hunger for the horizontal, I do think is largely in part, and I'm putting this on my shoulders as a guy who's been pastoring for 15 years. So who kind of finds myself, leading folks who are in that stage right now. So I think this generation's appetite for being rallied towards the horizontal, I do think largely comes because they were overfed the vertical to the exclusion largely of the horizontal, right? And so now I do think there's an appetite that is birthed out of, right, I think, a genuine desire to exemplify God in the world, right? So I see the need for this more as like Paul at Mars Hill, where he goes to folks and he says, yo, man, I see y'all are very religious in many ways, and y'all are, right? So it's like, man, I see y'all are zealous for good works, but let me remind you that when Paul is charging Titus to instruct people to be zealous for good works, Paul's going to say, no, look, but here's what's going to not just increase your zeal, but direct your zeal, is you really have to know and understand the grace of God, right? So I see it as there's a group of people, I do think they're largely headed in the right direction for the wrong reasons, which is going to make it easier for them to be swept away and manipulated. And I just want to come back behind and say, no, look, all right, I see you're zealous for good works. I see that you really do want to reflect the goodness of God in the world, but here's how that takes place, right? It takes place by reflecting on God's goodness in Christ and in salvation. So I do think we have a bunch of folks that are eager to apply the gospel, and I think they have assumed a level of depth and understanding that I don't think that they have. And so I just want to come alongside. And I think that the need for this is to say, let's round it out. Let's fill it out so that we all can go together.
Can I interact with that? And that's great. I'm glad that he brought that out because, and I don't know if we see things differently. I mean, he lives in Atlanta, so he's in a hot spot, and I'm not. So, but
rhyming when I don't want to rhyme.
But so to me, I personally, from where I sit, want to ignite that appetite. So whereas one person, I don't even know if this is what John was saying necessarily, but regardless, for the sake of this, one person may say, people want this, they're just misguided in their pursuit of it. I'm more on the other side. They don't seem to want it. And there are substitutes for it that would make people feel like, and I don't think I need to want it because what I have is as good a thing to want as what you're proposing. So I'm saying, I know these brothers personally. I'm like, I wanted to co-labor with some people who I know, they want it, they have it. They're like Jono said, they're always like recognizing when the pendulum is swinging or if the pendulum is swinging, very committed to the vertical as the foundation out of which the right horizontal application has to come. And I wanted us to use our collective weight with Dr. Smith as the chief cornerstone Dr. Smith is the cornerstone to lure, like he said, to rally up, to draw those people out and say, can we do it together? And let that collective rejoicing in it and proclamation of it then waft and wave that aroma around so that the more who are out there, see, I'm not saying nobody's out there want it. I was just talking about the general tenor. More will come, and then the people who said, I didn't want it. But now that I'm smelling it, that's what I want. It's like the person who's not hungry till everybody's food gets in. Then they're like, yo, can I? But I asked you if you wanted anything. I didn't want it. But when your food came in and I smelled it, I started wanting it. So whether it be the person who's out there misguided, I want it, but I'm misguided, or the person I don't want it, but if the aroma reaches you, you would want it. This is why I think this conference can be part of arousing people's appetite for this thing in light of what Jono said, the fact that you can have one without the other, and both of those things lead you nowhere fast, one without the other. But when they're rightly held together, and sometimes you do have to overcompensate for the lack thereof, but you always want to make sure that we bear witness to. But in God's economy, these two don't really coexist without each other. Not in this world.
So like I love all of that. And so the next question, I'm going to answer a little bit myself only because when you hear the question, it'll be like, no, this is one that I should attempt to answer before I give it to y'all. But why almost all minorities and more particularly black people leading something like this? Now, I will start with just kind of the vision that was cast to all of you, I hope well. But I do think that there's a sense in which something like this really could be beautiful. I know some people might peer in on it and be like, oh no, they're only doing that because they're such and such and such and such. This is not a labor of anger. This is not a labor of pessimism. This is a labor of love, only because it's very hard for me to think that celebrating something, not to the exclusion of something else, but just lifting something up, will ever be a bad thing, especially if it is a vertical. We're pointing to God and we're showing you that there are minorities that, and there are so many stereotypes that stick in people's head. I talked to all of y'all about just even coming from the black church, the Church of God in Christ, the United Holy Church, and the way that sometimes those things are viewed. Surely everyone has their problems, but it's stuff that ain't even problems that's viewed like problems. But something like this where it's like, no, you get to see the goodness of the Lord, and you get to see the goodness of how he uses his people from a particular ethnic group. Yes, Revelation 7, every tribe and tongue, we gonna show you one of them. not like we gonna speak in tongues. We gonna show you one of the tongues that's gonna be. Amen. So why a mostly minority lineup? Help me out, y'all. I'm faltering. Let's go.
Yo, there's a Eugene Robinson. I'm not sure what his fake background is, but he wrote this book called Disintegration, the Splintering of Black America. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is this concept of Black normalcy. And so he's like, man, if you go on the news, here's two things that you'll see: Black novelty and Black dysfunction, which means this, right? If you see, they'll bring in the Black folks to talk about, like, he'll say, if there's a motorcycle club, right, that's led by a Black dude, the news will bring him in to talk and say, yo, I didn't know Black people like this. This is great, right? So he's an outlier. Or on the front page, it's going to be pictures of Black dysfunction. But he says what you don't get is Black normalcy. So when they bring somebody on to talk about the weather or the science behind motorcycle helmets, it's usually going to be a person from the majority culture, because they're set aside to do the normal things, and often you set the minority aside to do novel things or special things, right? And so what he advocates for in this book, and I'm going to get to my point by way of analogy, is like, no, what needs to take place is Black normalcy, right? That he advocates for. No, don't just bring Black folks in to talk about the special stuff. It's important that we hear about the ordinary stuff, the elementary stuff, from people who are often set aside, right? In the climate that we're in right now, as we've talked through, right? Like, and I mean, and all of y'all know, right? You like, you can't count how many times you've been brought into, hey, we'd love for you to talk about race, to write a book on race, to this. And what we're saying is, that's fine, but don't just bring us in for the how-to stuff. There's other foundational, elementary stuff that's relevant to everybody. And it's actually good for all of us if it comes through the lens of somebody that may have had a different experience, right? And so it's the reason why, personally, for me, I'm grateful for everybody that spent their time on books and resources about horizontal things, right? Like the Duce brought up. But it's like, no, like, I want to spend my time writing books on prayer and perseverance and hope and all of those things. It's the reason why, and I'm going to put Duce out here on the spot, why for years I've been saying, you got to write. It's the reason why I said, Duce, I will pay you out of my own pocket. You need to write.
Amen. Amen.
Everybody erupts and clapping.
But I do think, like, what I love about this is, man, it is those, like, timeless truths, those things that are always relevant, that I'm excited that we really get to spend time on that. And we show that, that it's, African-American culture is good for more than talking about perseverance in the midst of heartache, or giving an apologetic for CRT or whatever else folks do. I'm excited that we just get a chance to talk about the things that gripped our hearts, that changed us, and have changed the people that have been influenced by us.
Yeah. Amen. More thoughts. That was really good.
No, so I think in light of kind of what Duce and Jono said a minute ago, where we have a tendency to polarize everything, right? So we either put people in the box of being a vertical guy or a horizontal guy. I think being able to see dudes who you hear and see talk about how do we feed people's belly, right? Like, how do we talk about redlining? Like, how do we talk about injustices and things like that? Like, being able to see guys that can articulate those things well, and then articulate the truths and foundational things of the gospel, like from this culture that tends to get put in a box, to me is like, no, I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited about it. And I think just knowing everybody that's gonna be presenting it, I think, like I said this when me and Jonathan was talking, like I'm a fanboy right now. So I'm like kind of in the midst looking at dudes who I know do that excellently, like who do it well. And then like the cornerstone, right? Right? So it's like he probably will.
Well, he's not here.
He's probably right. Christ
Of
is
the
the
church.
cornerstone.
He's
of
the cornerstone
church,
of the
the conference. Right.
Of the speaking list, the panel. Yeah.
No, but just being able to see, even going back to Eugene Robinson's book, like seeing the diversity within the ethnic culture, like we're not a monolith. Like I'm different from Duce. I'm different from John O. I'm different from Clint. I'm different from Jonathan. I'm different from Robert Smith. And it's like, you're gonna be able, I think, my hope, this is what I'm seeking the Lord for, what I'm praying is that you're gonna see a mix of diversity that all look collectively the same ethnically, but are going to be expounding and lifting up the truths of the gospel and the truths about Jesus and our great salvation in a way that can show people that we're not only those who talk about race and those type of things. Like we could speak well to these glorious truths of the gospel, as well as other things. And I'm just excited to be in the house, and to see that done well, and excellently. Yeah.
There, it's a lot of like movies where it'll be like it'll start with a random scene, maybe like a girl hanging from like a hot air balloon, and then it'll just like pause and be like, I bet you're wondering how I got here. And it rewinds back like 2 days or something. I think that we have a really, and God blessed it. I was surprised that everybody said yes, to be honest with you. Not because like everybody has all the reason to say no, but it's just like, I was just very happy that it could happen. But I feel like people get to see the horizontal, because it's like it's always what's popping. Like people will always care about their needs here on earth, the felt needs, everything like that. But I feel like that's the hanging from the hot air balloon. Like that's everybody's hanging from the hot air balloon. We're about to get to see, I bet you're wondering how I got here. And then you lift up Jesus and it's like, oh, that's like, this is the foundation for the way that everybody looks at this. I remember the first time I read anything by Frederick Douglass, I was floored at like, oh, dang, this had like a lot to do with the same God that I worship. And I think that this could similarly be something
and
like that.
Just jumping on that, I think just so many older dudes, I guess is the best way to say it, that I've watched and listened to who have expounded, like even in Black culture, like this has always been foundational in Black culture. So it's not like we found a group of dudes that like think this way because they went to this seminary or did this specific thing. But it's like, no, these are the truths that the slaves was holding on to when they was in slavery, and they had hope in their situation that wasn't like a presently good-looking situation, right? And they was able to carry on because they gripped these truths so tightly and believed in the what was to come, even in the midst of the what was at that time. And so I think even reminding the culture that, no, this is what we have always been about. is also something that to me like needs to be restated over and over and over again, so that we don't forget that, like, when we hear these things stated, quoted, preached, talked about, we don't forget that these truths have always been part of our history as Black people in America, who believed in the Christian faith. And so, and even let me rewind, even before in America, let's go to, Africa and those places where these truths was even rocking them back then, and where they held tightly to it then. And so I just think not losing that essence and reminding everybody that this is something that we've always been about and have always held to is just dope, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have kind of answered my final question pretty heavily.
Well, last time
I'll
said restate the question anyway, and so I'm gonna say just ask your last question.
Just ask the question anyway. What is it that you guys just personally? What is it that you're hoping and praying that the Lord does at this conference, through this conference? Just generally, I just thought that'd be a good way to kind of end it. Just what are you guys hoping? I guess Clint, you can.
Yeah, I think for me, connecting kind of the last two questions, my affections for Christ have been deeply stirred. So the vertical components in God's grace and kindness, first in these relationships through Duce's preaching, and when I really started walking with the Lord in college, and it was like, wait a minute, I grew up on hip hop, I grew up on some things, and he's preaching these truths I'm hearing elsewhere, but I don't, like, this is not a culture I'm as comfortable in, or they're not speaking my language the way he is. So then I think that stirred my affections for God, and like, wait a minute, I can, like, God's language, his speech is diverse. His truths are the same for everyone, but how by the Spirit, through his word, he speaks our heart language, so to speak. And so I think that contextualized faithfulness to the Bible stirred my heart, so that currently, somebody was asking me recently who your favorite preachers to listen to. And at first I felt guilty, like, oh, shoot, I'm not listening to enough preaching because I don't know the answer. But then the more I search my heart, I'm like, no, the reason I don't is because my favorite preachers are at my church. Like, so it's when Hez preaches. It's when, our other pastors preach. And so Hez recently, particularly, I've been on sabbatical, like the Lord's using his sermons in my soul. And then John O's preaching, and then his book, on prayer that really stirred my affection. So for me, kind of as the, I'll say playfully, the token white guy, because I can't really answer the other question from the leadership perspective. But I think for me, it's like, no, like, these are instruments, God, like instruments of grace. God is so used in my soul for the transcendent things that I'm like, I'm just here for good preaching, and then counted a privilege to get to participate in it. And so for me, it's the richness of the content. And then I think there is a particular, I think it's often, even in my experience in these conversations for the last couple of decades, often Black people put themselves in white spaces because of vertical motivations. And I agree with the fact that it's not often that white people put themselves in Black spaces because of vertical motivations. And so, like, even in the conversation of, like, okay, why am I asked to speak or not in the conversation? Like, it's like, yeah, I think the world needs to see this, because the truths are transcendent and do transcend cultures. Then this can look all kinds of different ways. And so I'm excited personally to just benefit from the content that the Lord would use. And then I also hope that it would achieve a unifying effect that's more caught than taught per se in the horizontal stuff. That there is man, we really are united by this incredible God and his incredible salvation. And let's do the hard horizontal work, but the unity is there because of what God has done. So that I hope that is caught from a lot of people.
Amen.
For me, Koinonia, again, I think we're all saying the same thing, or we're saying similar things. There's a koinonia that my soul longs for in this climate. Because of COVID, we probably spend a lot more time indoors than we probably would. Some of us, some people, your life still allows you to come and go, but you spend a little more time. You look at screens a lot. You're peering into worlds that you don't have physical or tangible access to through the screens, and so you're participating. You're watching this or watching that, and I just noticed that there is a fellowship. There is a unity, a partnership around certain things all over the place, where I have not found the level, the volume of fellowship that I'm accustomed to. I come from an era where I was always in a room where the room was dominated by this right, horizontal and vertical, this focus on God and this application to the horizontal situation, man-to-man relationships. That was, now again, Jono makes like sometimes, because I'm just a little older, sometimes I'll listen to Jono talk about the failure of the horizontal application, and sometimes I'll get defensive at that because I kind of predate when I felt like the blend was better. And then I think he came on the scene, and when they started really occupying leadership spaces, I think maybe there was this tilt where it was all vertical, and there was maybe some neglect on the horizontal. Again, I don't want to be arrogant and say that we had it right, but I'm just saying I felt like I was tasting the vertical. The first time I saw it was at a conference back in the 90s, early 90s, called Impact Conference. It came out of Campus Crusade, but it was specifically where the Black cultural expression was part of the leadership, and they were presenting the transcendent, how excellent is your name in all the earth, truths about the Lord Jesus, and they did it always bringing it to bear to where we were on the streets. You would hear them talking about the application to a hip-hop context. You would hear them asking, is Christianity a white man's religion? And the answer is no. You would hear, they passed us out books, Roots, Black Presence in the Bible. It was there in the 90s where I saw that. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to be like that. And then, and I guess I've lived long enough to see it come in and go out and need to come in again. But I'm thinking about what Paul says in Philippians, where he thanks God for the Philippians for their koinonia in the gospel. He calls it your koinonia, your partnership. Koinonia is just a Greek word for fellowship or your partnership. And he says, I thank God for your partnership in the gospel. He says, you stood with me in my imprisonment and in my defense and confirmation. Whether I'm in prison because of the gospel, whether I'm standing flat-footed and I'm proclaiming it, you're around me and you're with me. Yeah. I'm just an addict for that. I want to see unbelievers come into it. I want to see believers rallied by it. And I have not had that. Call it COVID, call it a shift in affections, call it whatever it is. That's what I want. I want to do it with brothers like this, and I want to do it amidst brothers and sisters who come out for it, because I want to get back to my life being full of this. And so this is one of the places where I believe that we're going to aim for that, and I want to see God do that.
Is this a safe space? Is it a safe space?
Well, we can.
Okay. It said it'd be on YouTube.
Go ahead, talk it out.
I come out of the Black church. And there is.
Can you be more specific when you say the Black church?
Okay, yeah, you're right. I come out of a context that was predominantly African American and churchy, and I don't want to go too far what I come out of, but which I'm not afraid to. I come out of full gospel Baptist church, right? Like churchy. It's churchy, Doc. Mm-hmm. And so there is something about Black culture that just in my soul. It just resonates with who I am, what I am, and just I'm looking forward to having that. I appreciate everything about my church. I appreciate being here. I love it. I love the work that we're doing, partnering together across cultural boundaries and things like that. But if I'm honest, y'all, like, it's something specific about African American culture in the church that my heart just it just eats it up when I hear the songs sung, when I hear the preaching preached in a certain way, and the way that things are. And so I think for me, I'm kind of like Duce, where it's just been a long time. And let me say this too. Like this is a upper echelon caliber of it, right? So all these dudes that can like articulate and give the word the way they give it in that context. And then we haven't really talked a lot just about the worship, or I can't. Dr. Duce told me I can't use that word. The praise, the singing, the lifting up of the voices, that part. Like, first of all, this brother over here, I just value the way he is able not just to sing well, but is able to command the room in a way that gets the people to actually lift up their voices the way the Bible tells us to sing loudly, right? So first of all, I appreciate you. And I also appreciate TK, who is a brother that I've heard in the past and is dope. And he's at a church with one of my brothers, Ryan Brooks, at Vertical Church. And KJ Scriven, like I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor the point, but what I'm trying to say is that I think there's something about the culture that I love, that I am just overjoyed to see, and then to see it from like this crowd of guys. I'm ready. I'm ready for Acts 2. To see the awe happen in the midst of an atmosphere where God is lifted up, beheld, and our faces can be left glowing with the glory of the Lord as we leave out. And I'm sorry if I'm taking y'all up into the rafters for a minute, but that's just how I am. And that's like my expectation, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So, yeah, amen.
Yeah, no, same, man. I'm excited just to be stirred, right? Like we've all talked about, COVID has been tough. Like I remember our church didn't meet in person for a year, and there was, as time went on, I just the best words that I could give to describe, like folks asked how I was, and I was just like, man, I'm deflated, right? It's like my faith is still there, but it just kind of feels like it's shrunk. And I am, reading, praying, all of this stuff, but there's just something about the embodied presence, like being with the people of God, that, the first Sunday we gathered as a church in over a year was at the end of March. And I got in there and it was, 50 of us there, masks and stuff on, but we left and somebody asked me how I was. And I'm like, I just feel full, right? And there's an aspect where, man, I love to do that with my family here in ATL week in and week out. But I'm excited about being able to do that with, my family from all across the place, right? So to be there with folks that I know, and to be in a spot with like people that you meet for the first time, but as soon as y'all start to talk about the love that you have for God, your experiences, you feel like I've known them for forever. And so I'm excited for that to take place. And two, I mean, just for me, like, just to kind of speak to what we've said in the past, or what has been said as we go on, as I talk about the critiques and the failings of what's going on in the past. Like, I say that introspectively, right? I say that not as somebody that's bitter or angry or blaming anybody, right? It's somebody that it's like, nah, like I was a pastor at a young age. And so I look back and I see ways that I was on the wrong side of the spectrum in the cultural moment that we were in, and ways that in my youth, right? I mean, I'm still young, but ways in my like youth, I overcorrected. And so now, as time has gone on, I feel like there's a little bit more sobriety. And I do see like just the hole there, right? And I just feel like that if we all were honest, that there is this hole, there's a gap when it comes to really ensuring that everybody that we're going to put on the front lines has really been through orientation, right? So there's a gap in ensuring that everybody that's going to do the application, right, the back half of Paul's letters, has really been entrenched in the orthodoxy, the front part. And so I'm excited in this stage right now just to be a part of it, trying to tilt this ship in the right way. So glad to be with all of y'all brothers, and excited for the time that we get to share.
Yeah, nah, it's super dope. Well, everybody, thank y'all for joining us. Everyone who was watching the video, the Transcend Conference in Greensboro, North Carolina, September the 17th and the 18th at Lebanon Baptist Church. Please do go to www.transcendconference.com. Get you a ticket. We're now offering a group rate. We'll have more of that like on there. Like, please do come through. And until then, y'all be blessed, and we hope to see you there.
Our God's in the building tonight, on deck in light with splendor and might. Hands in the air if you're feeling them. I know the feeling is light.